What if I told you that the most dangerous battles of your life will never be fought in the open, but in the silence of your own thoughts? Think about it. Long before actions ever take shape, they are born in the hidden chambers of the mind. That's where desire whispers, and that's where lust begins its quiet work. It doesn't come roaring at first. It flirts. It lingers in a glance, in a fantasy you allow yourself to entertain for just a moment. But make no mistake, what feels harmless is already sharpening its claws. Lust is never satisfied with a little. It feeds on secrecy. It thrives in the dark, and it always asks for more. That innocent spark you think you control will eventually demand your freedom. And here's the trap. It doesn't simply promise pleasure. It promises fulfillment, intimacy, escape, yet in the end it leaves you emptier than before, restless and chained to the very thing you thought you could manage. And there's another danger when lust takes root. It doesn't just poison you, it distorts how you see others. The person you once valued as a soul becomes reduced to an object of desire, something to consume rather than cherish. Slowly, subtly, it reshapes your character, bending your will towards self-indulgence and away from true love. But here's the truth that few are willing to face. The small compromises you make in private are not small at all. They are bricks laid on the road towards slavery. The longer you walk, the harder it becomes to turn back. So here's the question. Is there a way to break free before it's too late? Stay with me until the end, because the very chains lust forges can be shattered, but only by something far stronger than desire itself. Desire left unchecked will devour your soul. If you're serious about breaking free, grab 7 biblical secrets to destroy lust before it destroys you. Link in description. It always starts small, not with a scandalous act, not with a dramatic fall, but with a seed, a single thought entertained in the quiet. That is where the battle is lost or won. You see, the imagination is not a neutral playground. It is the workshop of the soul. What you allow to dwell there, whether light or darkness, will eventually take shape in your life. Think of how temptation works. Rarely does it come crashing into your day, demanding immediate surrender. Instead, it whispers, a subtle suggestion, a fleeting picture, a memory replayed. At first you feel in control. It's only a thought, nothing more. But thoughts are never just thoughts. They are blueprints. They build desires, and desires eventually demand expression. What you rehearse in secret will one day become the habits that define you. Here's the frightening part. Your mind doesn't simply reflect reality. It shapes it. Every time you give space to fantasy, you're paving a road, strengthening a pattern that becomes easier to walk the next time. Slowly your imagination bends, until what once felt unthinkable begins to feel inevitable. That is why sin rarely feels sudden. By the time it appears in action, it has already lived in the imagination for a long time. And the danger is subtle. You don't notice the chains forming, because they are woven from invisible threads. Small compromises, silent indulgences, secret daydreams. You tell yourself it's harmless, no one knows, it doesn't hurt anyone. But the truth is, the mind is being trained, reshaped, conditioned toward corruption. And when the opportunity for sin arrives in the physical world, you are already prepared to give in, because you practiced it in the imagination first. Let's be honest, imagination can be one of the greatest gifts. It can inspire creativity, fuel vision, and deepen love. But the very same power can destroy you if it is handed over to lust. The same tool that builds dreams can also build prisons. That's why the smallest indulgence in thought is not small at all. It is an open door. And once you open that door, it rarely closes quiet. Think about how easily the mind can dress sin in disguise. What begins as curiosity soon becomes a lingering look. What feels like a passing thought becomes a picture you replay over and over. The more you feed it, the stronger it becomes. And soon you are not simply entertaining imagination. It is entertaining you. It is controlling you. This is why purity is not about external rules or restrictions. It is about guarding the inner life. Because what you plant there will always grow. If you sow lust, it will grow into addiction. If you sow compromise, it will grow into bondage. But if you sow truth, discipline, and reverence for God, it will grow into strength, freedom, and real love. And here is the hope. The same imagination that drags people downward can be redeemed. You can train your thoughts, discipline your focus, and fill your inner life with things that bring life instead of death. But it requires vigilance. It requires a choice to close the door before the whisper becomes a roar. So when that subtle thought first appears, Don't make the mistake of thinking it is harmless. That moment is the battlefield. That is where victory is won or lost. Win the battle in the imagination, and you will win the war in your actions. We live in a world overflowing with promises of happiness, satisfaction, and escape. Lust whispers its own version of this promise. If you give in, you'll finally feel alive. You'll finally be satisfied, and for a fleeting moment, it seems to deliver. The rush is real. The desire feels quick. But have you ever noticed what happens next? That moment fades, and almost instantly, something inside feels emptier than before. The very thing that promised fulfillment ends up leaving you hungrier. That is the cruel trick of lust. It never keeps its word. It paints a picture of joy and intimacy, but when you reach out to grab it, you find only shadows. Like drinking salt water to quench your thirst, it leaves you craving more, but never satisfied. And each time you return to it, the thirst grows stronger, while the satisfaction grows weaker. It's a vicious cycle that never gives what it promises. Why does it work this way? Because lust is built on illusion. It takes the deepest, most sacred longing of the human soul, the desire for love, connection, and meaning, and twists it into a counterfeit. Instead of intimacy, it offers isolation. Instead of closeness, it creates distance. Instead of joy, it leaves you with shame. The more you reach for it, the more it slips through your fingers. And here's the subtle danger. Lust convinces you that the next time will be different. The next glance, the next thought, the next indulgence will finally deliver the satisfaction you crave. But the next time always feels just like the last time, empty. And the more you chase it, the more it conditions your heart to expect fulfillment from something that cannot possibly give it. Think about what this does over time. Every time you give in, you're training your soul to settle for less than it was created for. You're telling yourself, this is enough, while deep down you know it never is. That conflict inside eats away at you, pulling you into frustration, guilt, and despair. And the tragedy is that the more you give in, the harder it becomes to even recognize what real love and real fulfillment look like. It's like being lost in a desert, chasing mirages. The vision looks real, the promise looks refreshing. But when you finally stumble toward it, all you find is sand. And so you keep chasing the next mirage, more desperate, more exhausted, but never closer to the water your soul truly craves. The real danger isn't just in the act, it's in what lust steals from you. It steals your ability to see clearly, to love purely, to experience true intimacy. It numbs you to the things that matter most. It leaves you feeling disconnected from others, from yourself, and ultimately from God. That's the cost of believing the lie. But here's the truth you need to hear. The fulfillment you're searching for cannot be found in a moment of lust. It can't be found in fantasies or in feeding the appetite of desire. Real fulfillment comes from something deeper, something lasting, something that doesn't fade when the rush is over. Lust can only ever promise. It cannot deliver. And the sooner you see through that lie, the sooner you break its power. Because once you recognize that every promise lust makes is hollow, you begin to starve it of the very belief it feeds on. That's when freedom becomes possible, not by sheer willpower alone, but by replacing the counterfeit with the real, by seeking the love that doesn't fade, the joy that doesn't end, the intimacy that isn't self-centered but self-giving. So ask yourself, how many times has lust promised you satisfaction, and how many times has it delivered only regret? When you finally get honest with that answer, the illusion shattered. Once the illusion shatters, you can stop chasing shadows and start walking toward the light that truly satisfies. Have you ever noticed how temptation never shows you the real cost up front? It paints a picture of pleasure, of excitement, of something you deserve. But what it hides, what it never wants you to see, is the way it strips away the dignity of others in your eyes. That's the silent danger. It doesn't just corrupt your heart. It warps the way you see people around you. When lust takes over, a person is no longer seen as a soul, with hopes, fears, and infinite worth. They are reduced to a body, a shape, an object of gratification. It's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Instead of asking, how can I honor this person, a hidden question becomes, how can this person satisfy me? That is the moment when humanity is exchanged for utility. Think about it. Someone who carries the very image of God, created with dignity, created with eternal value, becomes a thing to consume, not a person to love. That's the true theft of lust. It doesn't just steal your purity, It steals your vision. It blinds you to the sacred worth of another human being and replaces love with you. And here's the tragedy. When you begin to use people in your mind, it's only a matter of time before you start using them in life. The imagination is never just imagination. It's trained. Every time you reduce someone to a fantasy, you're practicing dishonor, rehearsing selfishness, preparing to treat real people as objects. Lust never tells you this. It whispers that nobody is harmed by a thought, by a glance, by a secret indulgence. But that's a lie. Every moment you indulge, you're chiseling away at the way you view others. Slowly, your ability to see people as precious, valuable, and worthy of respect begins to fade, and the more it fades, the more difficult it becomes to form real healthy relationships. Because real love requires sacrifice. It requires seeing someone as a whole person, not as a product to consume. Love says, I am here to give. Lust says, I am here to take. One builds intimacy, the other destroys it. One cherishes, the other consumes. One sees a person, the other sees a possession. And it doesn't stop with how you treat others. It reaches into how you treat yourself. When you use people in your thoughts, you train yourself to believe that you too are only as valuable as what you can offer physically. It's a two-edged sword. Not only do you objectify others, but you also begin to objectify yourself, reducing your own worth to fleeting desires and impulses. This is why lust always leads to isolation. You can't build genuine connection when the foundation of your vision is used. Eventually, you'll find yourself surrounded by people, but unable to truly love them, unable to truly respect them, because your heart is being conditioned to take rather than give. But here's the hope that distorted vision can be healed. The same way lust rewires the way you see others, truth can rewire it back. Every time you choose to resist, every time you choose to see someone as a brother, a sister, a fellow image bearer of God, you reclaim what lust tried to steal. You take back your ability to love purely, to see clearly, to honor deeply. So ask yourself, how do you want to see the world? Through the clouded eyes of selfish desire, or through the clarity of love? Because the choice you make in private today will shape how you treat people tomorrow. And the way you treat people will ultimately define the life you build. If you're tired of fighting the same battle alone, take the next step. Get 7 biblical secrets to destroy lust, your roadmap to freedom. Links in the description and pinned comment. Don't wait. Strength doesn't disappear all at once. It slips away in fragments, almost too small to notice at first. A single choice, one compromise, another excuse, and before long the will that once stood firm begins to bend. That's how it works. Nobody wakes up one morning and suddenly finds themselves enslaved. The chains are forged link by link, hidden beneath the surface, until it's too late to ignore. It often begins with the thought, this doesn't really matter, it's just one time. That's the best. A seemingly harmless indulgence that feels too small to cause any real damage. But the truth is, every time you surrender, you weaken the muscle of your will. And just like a muscle left unused, it grows weaker the more you neglect it. The appetite grows stronger, and the power to resist grows smaller. The very act of yielding makes the next temptation harder to fight. Think of it this way. If you give a thief permission to enter your home once, he won't be satisfied. He'll come back, emboldened, and this time he won't knock. He'll just walk in. Lust operates the same way. What started as something you thought you could easily control begins to control you. At first you choose it, but eventually it chooses you. The terrifying part is how gradual the decline can be. You don't notice it happening day by day. You still tell yourself, I could stop if I really wanted to. But the more you repeat that lie, the more powerless you become. The will erodes not because of one great defeat, but because of 1,000 small surrenders that you've convinced yourself weren't insignificant. And then comes the cycle of shame. You fall again, you promise yourself never again, and yet the very same desire whispers louder the next time. Each defeat eats away at your confidence, until you begin to believe that freedom is impossible. You start to accept the chains as part of your identity, and that is the deadliest lie of all. This erosion doesn't just affect your inner life, it spills into everything. Relationships suffer because you're no longer able to give yourself fully. Your focus weakens because your mind is divided. Your spiritual clarity fades because guilt clouds your vision. You start to hide not only from others, but from God himself. The will that once chose truth and strength now bends towards secrecy and compromise. But here's the good news. What is eroded can be rebuilt. Willpower is not permanently lost. It can be strengthened again. The same way a weakened muscle regains strength through training, your inner resolve can be restored through discipline and truth. Every choice matters. Just as each surrender made you weaker, each act of resistance makes you stronger. The first victory may be small, but it plants a seed of hope. The second builds on it, and over time the will begins to recover, rising from weakness into strength. The battle is real, and yes, it's exhausting, but every time you stand against temptation, you reclaim a part of your freedom. Every time you say no to the whispers that once controlled you, you forge a new chain, one made not of slavery, but of strength. And as those victories accumulate, the will that once eroded away becomes unshakable again. So the question is simple: are you willing to fight for your will before it completely crumbles? Because the longer you wait, the deeper the erosion. But if you choose to resist now, even in the smallest of ways, you begin rebuilding what was lost. And that choice can become the turning point, the moment the chains stop tightening and the will begins to rise again. There's a strange silence that creeps into the soul when sin is allowed to linger. At first it's barely noticeable, like the faint ringing in your ears after standing too close to a loud noise. You tell yourself it's nothing, you'll be fine. But slowly, gradually, that quiet hum becomes your new normal, and you don't even realize what's being lost. That is the true danger. Not just the act itself, but the dulling of your spirit, the soft erosion of your sensitivity to the voice of God. When desire takes root, it doesn't always come with a loud crash. Sometimes it comes softly, like a warm fog wrapping around you. It convinces you that what once pierced your heart no longer matters. What used to grieve you now barely stirs a flicker of conscience. You start saying, it's just a thought, just a glance, just a moment. But that's the trick. Your heart begins to harden, and every small compromise thickens the callus around your soul. The real tragedy is how unnoticed it all feels. You don't wake up one morning declaring, I don't care about God anymore. Instead, it's a slow drip. You still say the right words, you still go through the motions, but deep down your prayers feel flat, your worship feels hollow, and your hunger for truth fades. You're present in body but absent in spirit. And that absence doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from letting lust steal your focus, distract your mind, and dull your love. The enemy doesn't need to make you hate God. He just needs to make you indifferent. Indifference is more subtle, more comfortable, and far more dangerous, because when you no longer feel the weight of sin, when you no longer sense the Spirit's conviction, you stop seeking help, you stop fighting back, you accept the numbness as normal. And once numbness becomes normal, chains become permanent. Think about how dangerous this really is. Imagine holding a burning coal in your hand. At first the pain would be unbearable, forcing you to drop it immediately. But what if your nerves were deadened? What if you couldn't feel the burn? You would keep holding it, and it would destroy you without you even realizing the damage being done. That's what lust does to the soul. It kills your ability to sense danger while it's destroying you from the inside out. But here's the good news. Numbness doesn't have to be permanent. The very fact that you're listening to these words right now proves that somewhere inside you, there's still a spark, still a longing to feel again, to come alive again, to be free again. That spark can be fanned into flame, but it requires a choice. You cannot entertain both light and darkness and expect your heart to remain sensitive. You cannot keep feeding lust and hope to feel the presence of God with the same depth. Something has to give. The way back begins not with shame, but with honesty. Honesty before God. Honesty before yourself. Admitting that the numbness is there is the first crack in the wall. And once the wall is cracked, light begins to seep in. The Spirit can work with brokenness, but he will not work with denial. So ask yourself this. Have you grown comfortable with a heart that barely feels? Have you accepted the dull ache of distance from God as your reality? If so, don't mistake silence for peace. True peace doesn't come from escaping conviction. It comes from restoration, and restoration begins the moment you stop ignoring the burn and finally let go of the coal. Your soul wasn't made to live numb. It was made to burn bright, to feel deeply, to love purely. And when you finally tear away the fog, you'll realize that the voice you thought was silent was there all along, waiting for you to wake up. It's amazing how the human mind can twist almost anything into a justification. When temptation knocks, we rarely slam the door shut immediately. Instead, we start negotiating. We tell ourselves it's harmless, just a passing thought, nothing dangerous. But that's the trap, the little whispers we use to excuse our choices become the very chains that hold us captive. Think about how subtle it really is. No one begins by saying, I want to destroy my purity, or I want to live in regret. No. It starts with phrases like, it's only once, it's just in my mind, I deserve this escape. Nobody will ever know. Excuses are dressed in soft clothing. They don't look like lies at first glance. They look like comfort, like relief. But the moment you buy into them, you're already losing ground. Every excuse works like a tiny crack in the foundation of your character. One crack seems too small to matter, but over time the whole structure weakens. Excuses are not neutral. They reshape who you are, one compromise at a time, and because they feel so small, so justifiable, they become even more dangerous than the sin itself. You may think you're safe because you haven't crossed some major line, but you're drifting, and drifting never leads to freedom. The frightening thing about excuses is how they multiply. One compromise requires another to cover it up, and another to explain why it's not really that bad. Before long, you're weaving an entire web of rationalizations that blind you to reality. What once seemed clearly wrong now feels almost reasonable. That's how the conscience is numbed, not by one dramatic decision, but by countless small ones. And here's the deeper problem. Excuses rob you of honesty. They train you to lie first to yourself. When you lose the ability to tell yourself the truth, you also lose the ability to fight. How can you resist something you've convinced yourself isn't dangerous? This is why excuses are so deadly. They don't just mask the sin, they silence the alarm. They trick you into sleeping while the fire spreads. But here's the part we rarely admit. Excuses feel good because they give us temporary relief. They ease the tension between what we know is right and what we want in the moment. They let us feel like we're still good enough, while doing what we know is wrong. That's why we cling to them. They let us enjoy the sin without fully facing the weight of it. Yet that comfort comes at a brutal cost. The more we excuse ourselves, the more we forfeit the strength to change. So how do you break free from this cycle? It begins with ruthless honesty. Stop softening the edges of sin. Stop calling it just a thought or just once. Call it what it is. Darkness loses its power the moment you drag it into the light. That's why confession, real, raw, uncomfortable honesty, is the beginning of freedom. It strips away the shield of excuses and forces you to face the battle head on. You will always find a reason to justify compromise if you go looking for one. But excuses will never protect you. They only protect the sin. The longer you defend it, the deeper it digs into your life. The moment you stop defending it, you starve it. And that's the turning point. When you stop making excuses, you finally start making progress. So ask yourself this. What excuses have you been clinging to? What little lies have you been whispering to make sin feel less heavy, less urgent? Because until you strip them away, you'll never see the truth. And until you see the truth, you'll never be free. Love was never meant to be about taking. It was always meant to be about giving. That's the first truth most people forget. The world shouts that love is about satisfaction, about what you can gain, about filling the emptiness inside with someone else's presence. But that's not love. That's hunger dressed in disguise. Real love does not devour, it nourishes. It does not demand, it serves. And this difference is what separates a soul trapped in desire from a soul set free to truly love. Think about it this way. When lust takes control, everything becomes about what you can extract from another person. You start to see them not as they are, but as a means to your own end. Slowly, almost without realizing it, your heart begins to bend inward on itself. The image of the other person fades, and all that remains is what they can give you. That is not love. It is slavery to the self. And every time you feed it, the chains grow tighter. But there is a higher way. Love in its purest form is not about possession. It's about sacrifice. It chooses to honor rather than exploit. It seeks the good of the other, even when it costs something. And here's the paradox. The more you give, the more full you become. This is the kind of love that breaks cycles of lust because it shifts the focus from self-indulgence to self-giving. The danger of lust is that it whispers a counterfeit message. You'll feel complete if you just take this one thing. But every time you listen, the emptiness only grows deeper. Love tells a different story. You will be complete when you learn to give. And this isn't about empty moral duty. It's about aligning yourself with the very design of your soul. We were created to love in a way that reflects something far greater than ourselves. Consider the relationships that last. the ones that truly flourish. They aren't built on constant grasping or shallow desire. They are built on trust, on sacrifice, on a willingness to put the other first. These relationships endure because they are rooted in a foundation, stronger than fleeting passion. Passion burns bright, but it also burns out. Love, real love, endures because it feeds on something eternal. Here's the hard truth. If you let lust dominate your heart, you will never be able to experience the depth of love you were created for. Lust numbs your capacity to see others as priceless souls. It blinds you to their worth, and in doing so it blinds you to your own. But when you choose to rise above it, when you fight to see others not as objects, but as image bearers of infinite value, something begins to change inside you. Freedom grows, clarity grows. Love begins to take root where lust once lived. This is not an easy path. It demands discipline, courage, and an honest look at your own desires. But the reward is far greater than the fleeting rush lust ever gave you. The reward is the ability to love deeply, to love freely, and to love without chains. And when you taste that, you realize how shallow and unsatisfying lust truly is. So the question is this: will you settle for the counterfeit, or will you reach for the real thing? Because the choice is always before you. One path leads to emptiness dressed as pleasure. The other leads to a love so powerful it reshapes your very life. And once you've glimpsed that kind of love, you'll never want to go back. In the end, every hidden compromise carries a cost. What begins as a whisper in the heart can grow into a prison that steals your freedom, your clarity, and even your ability to love. But you were never meant to live in chains. You were created for something higher, something stronger, something that satisfies far beyond the fleeting promises of desire. The fight against lust isn't just about avoiding destruction. It's about reclaiming the life, the purpose, and the love you were designed for. If you're serious about breaking free, don't leave this battle to chance. I've put together a guide that dives deeper into the exact steps you can take. 7 biblical secrets to destroy lust before it destroys you. You'll find the link in the description. Go there now, take the first step, and choose freedom before lust takes any more from you.